Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Lipa, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal are in front.
God bless Arsenal Football Club. They gave us 3 whole days to celebrate the FA Cup. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. So today was supposed to be Patron Pod Day, and tomorrow was supposed to be Pod for Everyone Day. But the news cycle never stops, as we know. So what we're doing is we're doing this, and the reason you're listening to it right now is because this is a podcast for everyone, where we are going to talk Willian rumors. We are going to talk Francis Cagigao. Yeah, I'm going to call him Francis. We're going to talk layoffs and things of that nature. So we're going to get to a little bit of all that. And then tomorrow there will be a squad building scouting pod talking about philosophies of squad building, talking about value-based squad building, all the things that are no longer relevant at Arsenal Football Club. We'll even have some scouting of some under-the-radar players that we could afford cheaply if they were, obviously, Kia Drabchian clients. So we will be discussing that on the Patreon pod tomorrow. But today is a day for Clive and for Scott. Scott will be on down the line. Clive is on now. You can find him on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
Hello, indeed. So, all right, look, we'll talk Willian rumors in a moment because that's kind of fun. But it all kind of ties together. So, really quick summary of the news. The club put out a statement today. Interestingly, when they clawed the money back from the players, it was a club statement. Today, it is an update from your club. It's our club. When they're laying people off, it's our club. Throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been working hard to ensure that Arsenal Football Club emerges in a robust and strong position for the future. In line with other football clubs and many other businesses operating in the sport, leisure, and entertainment area, we've been impacted directly by COVID-19. Our main sources of income have all reduced significantly. Revenue from broadcasters, match day, and commercial activities have all been hit severely, and the impacts will blah, 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 blah. We know. Tough times. Cut to the chase. 55 people appear to be laid off. They talk about sponsorship money and ticket revenue and hopefully no second wave, but that's an uncertainty. Our aim has been to protect the jobs and base salaries of our people for as long as we possibly can. Unfortunately, we have now come to the point where we are proposing 55 redundancies. We don't make these proposals lightly. And one of my favorite parts of it, I have to admit, so I say these proposed changes are ultimately about ensuring we take this great football club forward, creating the right organization for a post-COVID world, and ensuring we have the resources to return to competing effectively at the top of the game here in Europe. It is signed by Raul Sanyehi and Vinay Venkatesham, although I am sure there is a cronky name associated with this decision as well. I do like the idea that this is a move that will help us compete at the top of the game domestically and in Europe. It is certainly a move that will do that, I am sure. Look, I approach this with a healthy dose of skepticism while accepting the realities of the circumstance within which we operate. I don't think this can be discussed without reading club statement. We are pleased to announce that we have reached a voluntary agreement with our first team players, head coaching core, coaching staff to help support the club at this critical time. We are proud and grateful to our players and staff for pulling together to support the club, our people, and our community in these unprecedented times, which are some of the most challenging we've faced in our history. When they clawed that money back, one of the interesting things was that Mesut Ozil didn't want to do it. We're not going to dive too deep in the Mesut Ozil thing, but Clive, he made the point that he wanted some assurances of how the money was going to be used, that it wasn't just going to line the owner's pockets, and I'm not saying that's necessarily what has happened, but it is interesting that at that PR moment where the leverage was greatest, where the need was most evident, other clubs didn't do it. Arsenal did it, clawed the money back. And here we are just scant few months later, a few days after winning the FA Cup, securing European football, which does increase the coffers by a bit. Now, indeed, those layoffs are happening nonetheless. So before we get into the Francis Cagigao, I'm just going to call him Francis, the Francis thing and Willian thing, how do you react to this news? Other than, firstly and most importantly, our sorrow and our thoughts and our concern for the people who are losing their jobs. These are human beings who need this employment, who work probably for a club they love. So in some ways a dream job, and in some ways, I'm sure, sustaining income, life-sustaining income. So that is our priority to always keep that in focus. But this podcast is obviously about the club from a sporting standpoint. So in terms of this decision, in whatever dimension you want to first analyze it, how do you react to this news?
Yeah, his first thing is sadness, and you hope that it doesn't have to happen. And there's many of us in jobs right now, and we're looking around and we're looking at firms and everyone's losing money. I mean, most of the world economy is based on people moving around and doing things, all based on mass gatherings, right? So guess what? Football falls into that as well. Imagine all the commercial things that need to happen at a club driven by a mass gathering. Well, if you can't have more than 30 people, that goes, right? So people that work in commercial departments, people that work in scouting departments, when there's certain levels of scouting that's not happening because the football's not happening, that goes. Certain things that happen on match day, which are driven by masses of people, that goes. Now you can say to yourself, well, football's different. We just hide it and we just hold these jobs. They're not very high paid jobs. Why not do that? And then our eyes immediately flip to the highest paid player in the club who's sitting at home not doing anything because he can't be able to put a jog on in training. You put two and two together, the £80 million a year which Ozil gets versus the low wages that some of these people get. And I will say, I'm not sure how many people are aware that people who do work at these clubs are really not very well paid for the roles they actually do. You know, it's almost seen as a privilege. And I met some chefs once at West Ham, just West Ham chefs. I met them in Newcastle. And they told me they were earning. It's not a criticism of West Ham because this is a football game. And it's not a lot, mate. You know, honestly, it's not a lot. And I'm thinking, crikey, these guys are so dedicated. They travel everywhere. They do everything for the team, for the players. And they don't get paid a lot of money. And you think to yourself, could we have done something? So really, what have Arsenal been trying to do for a long time? Reduce their cost base. And this has been just another signal of that, reducing their cost base. I wasn't massively against the Player Cup. I thought at that time it was the right thing to do. No one else has jumped on it yet. But what's becoming clear, really clear, is that the financial landscape going forward is showing some clarity now. We understand potentially when we could get people back in the stadiums, but that has been delayed. We know we're probably not going to have full attendance maybe for the whole of next season. That's 100 million to Arsenal straight away. And so, and all the commercials that come with that. And just to bring it down to, you know, I kept saying at the weekend, you know, I wasn't sure about us winning or not. And is Europe really that important this year? Well, I came to the conclusion that it probably was, just for the well-being of the club. But I think you get around £3 to £4 million to win the FA Cup. That's all. And because we qualified for the Europa League, there was a sort of performance-related base pay cut, wasn't there? You got some of it back if you qualify for Europa League, and you got all of it back if you qualify for Champions League. So you know, Arsenal actually lost money at the weekend from a wages perspective because they have to give back around 12 million or 11 million back to the players.
I mean, they gained some by obviously qualifying for free.
And they gained some qualifying for Europe, which I think we made around 30 million the year before, 30 to 40 million. So we're probably about 20 million up. Let's say we're 20 million up. 20 million in this environment isn't a lot of money. It's better than nothing. Let's keep it in perspective. It's not the 80 million we would get in the Champions League. And so things are incredibly tight. And it's a real shame because a lot of those people that work at the club, their roles are just not there. Hence the term redundancy. You get made redundant when there is no job for you. You know what I mean? And it's like, and so it's very difficult. It's very difficult to.
I could ask you why a scout no longer has a job to do, but we'll get to that in the next segment.
Yeah. Well. Then there's the flip side to this coin. So I'm giving one side, right, my business side.
Yep.
There's a flip side to this coin. You can use events to restructure and hide bad news, right? You can use this COVID event to say, well, you know what, I wanted to restructure the club anyway. This is an opportunity to do it. Let's do it. And let's rebuild it another way. And that's why I'm holding my real feelings, because I want to know what's going to happen next, which obviously you can't divulge on the same day. And you've given people notice they're going to be going through a redundancy process. Some of these people may have to reapply for their jobs and they in a different gauge. Some of these people are just done. They're gone. Right? So it'll be interesting to see how this flushes out and what messages come out. You have to see about you when you started the pod, Elliot, you know, I had this warm glow running through me for a few days, and that's suddenly gone again, isn't it? It's just gone. And we're back in a situation where we feel small again, while everyone else seems to be trucking along, and we're watching Manchester United working out their payment scheme for Jadon Sancho with God knows how much that's going to cost. Well, we're
It's just
getting rid
90
of
million pounds.
scout-
Come on, Clive,
Yeah.
drop in the bucket.
Yeah, well, we're getting rid of scouts and masseuses and commercial people and people look after executive boxes. Probably getting rid of those people because there's no flow coming through there. You know, people that show people to their boxes, for example. I mean, we're not talking about things that make a massive difference to our bottom line.
And can I just
It
point
just
one thing
shows-
out, Clive, too, just real quick, because you reference, people like ushers and, people that show people to their seats and things. I actually, you would know better than I would. I would think most of those types of employees are contracted on match day type thing, like temporary work type people who have a contract to show up on match day. I doubt 55 people made redundant. That's salaried workers. Those are people who are full-time employees of the club. So I would doubt, I'm sure there are lots more people who will not be getting income from the club who are used to it, contractors, vendors, ushers, things like that. That I understand. There's no job for them to do, but I'd be willing to bet these are more stable full-time employment type people.
Yeah, you'd think so, and of course we get the headlines of the key scouts that we know with the names that we remember, and so people then think it's going to be those type of people. So I think it's, hey, look, mate, this first initial feeling, I think it's really sad.
It's the right
it's a
first feeling,
shame.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't think it makes us feel strong, and I don't mind. It's funny how we suddenly become really cost conscious. Well, where were we when we were giving that contract out to Mesut Ozil? Where were these same people? A lot of them are staying in the club, and we still did it. So now I think we're reaping the rewards we're reaping the actions of that action, and I think it's not just that action, but there are many people within the club, particularly on the playing side, which we'd agree are overpaid. That's not me saying, these footballers get paid too much money, they will do a real job. If you just look at the market, look what's going on in other clubs, look at what's going on with clubs in our sort of competitive landscape, we overpay. We overpay for mediocrity, and that's why we can't get rid of these guys, right? They hang around. So, and I think it's a shame because we messed up on the playing side. Now the people that live and breathe the club on a daily basis and are fortunate enough to work for the club that they love have lost their jobs.
Yeah, and so I do want to start to get into the footballing part of this, but we had a pretty heated exchange, as we sometimes do when I am wrong, on the pod when the wage cut was announced. I felt very strongly that what we were basically doing was letting the players be the fall guy for the owner, passing the asset owner's risk onto the employees, in that case the players, and that the players were right to have questions about how those resources would be allocated. And it looks like Stan played a blinder here. He got the 12.5% back from the players. He's now letting 55 people go anyway, and rightly or wrongly. The other clubs did not do this. You saw Spurs took out a huge loan at low interest to help, keep their operation running. The fact is, I said at that time, Clive, and I reiterate, there are many ways that KSE can access the capital needed to operate Arsenal during this period of risk and reduced revenue. One way is cutting costs. There's only so deep a cut you can make. So it looks heartless to me to make these kinds of cuts when weighed against how they really impact the bottom line and the operating expenses. I'm not an accountant. I'm not smart enough to know if I'm right about that. But I do know that in this credit environment where credit is cheap and easy, that there are other ways KSE can fund the operation. Now, I tweeted something incredibly intellectually dishonest, which I deleted. Matt, Giant Gooner, pointed it out to me, and he's absolutely right to do so, saying that, Kroenke's fortune has actually increased during COVID. That's intellectually dishonest because the fact is, yes, Kroenke's Walmart holdings are worth more, which is, he's married to one of the Waltons, but he has a lot of exposure to a tremendous amount of risk in this environment. He owns real estate, which is depreciating, commercial real estate like strip malls in the US and stuff, which is massively depreciating in value. His stadium in LA is a quagmire. He's got multi-billions of dollars tied up in that. No one can go be in it. And seeing as how the U.S. is doing such a bang-up job handling the coronavirus situation to begin with, we're not getting any closer to people being able to go anywhere publicly. So he's really in deep shit. He owns a lot of these teams that have a lot of exposure. He owns a lot of real estate that has a lot of exposure. I acknowledge that time's not great for Stan, but as a result, I understand wanting to make cuts, but he's either going to have to sell one of these assets because he cannot have so much risk on his portfolio, or he's going to have to just extend himself. He's going to have to leverage himself. He's going to have to take out debt, and that's it. Yeah. And I mean, the decision to make these cuts, to take the 12.5% from the players, to lay off these 55 people, I realize that he's not in a great economic situation, but these are decisions weighed against other ways he can encumber the club and encumber, KSE and pay things off. And he's, it's like you look at the loan he made. I have to admit, we had Matt on. We talked about the loan he gave the club to pay down the stadium debt early. And that looked like a good thing for the club. And it is a good thing for the club. It frees up cash. But let's make no mistake, he gave himself, he gave the club a loan that he gets paid back with interest on all the interest. He will get made whole on that. So he actually comes out ahead. So I don't want to make Stan the boogeyman because that's a facile way of looking at it. But these kinds of decisions, it's hard to get behind them. I had a hard time getting behind what he did with the players. And people accuse me, how are you going to side with millionaires? I understand that, but I have a hard time defending this either for the same reasons. He has other ways to run the club through this downturn. And by the way, Clive, I don't think it is a foregone conclusion there'll be no fans in the stands for this upcoming season. I think there are plans in place to try to put some fans back in the stands. Maybe that's incredibly naive and optimistic, but I didn't even think Project Restart would make it all the way through, and it did really with no incident. So, maybe there will be fans in the stands, and maybe the foreign demand for the sport will be greater. I can tell you this much. There may not be a hell of a lot of live sports in the U.S. in the fall, the way things are going here. And the demand for the Premier League may increase, and there may be other commercial opportunities associated with that. I'm not trying to paint a rosier picture than it is, but I also think that the bleakness of the picture is unclear. So I'll give you a final word on that because I've gone on a long time here. I think that there's always costs and benefits being weighed, and I think with the moves that have been made by KSE during this period, they have opted to use leverage. I mean, let's put it this way, Clive. If they had laid off those 55 people the day before they announced the 12.5%, they wouldn't have gotten their 12.5%. You know what I'm saying? This is calculated. This is, let's get that 12.5%. Let's go win the FA Cup, make it into Europe, and then when everybody's feeling good, we announce the layoffs and people hopefully don't draw a line straight between the 12.5% and the layoffs. Because I believe it was sold to the players, and Arteta was manipulated, in my opinion, a little bit, was sort of told, hey, we all have to pull together, we all have to help the club. This helps, other people stay employed, and they don't have to make cuts if we do this, and it didn't work out that way. So before we get into the letting go of scouts and what that all means and how that ties into what we're going to discuss with Willian, do you have a sort of final thought on the appropriateness of these moves vis-a-vis maybe other ways that KSE can manage the club through this period? And I do think it's interesting that it's Raul and Vinay's name on this statement because, granted, they run the club on a day-to-day basis, but these decisions are not made at their level. There's simply no way they are being given the authority to manage the club through the crisis. I'm sure they were told they had to have some red ink on their paper, and this is where it went.
Well, if I'm going to get into a major discussion on football, I'm happy to have it, right? So I can only tell you how I feel when it comes to financials because that's not my thing. I could add
nor mine, to be fair.
I could add a further piece that, when they've restructured the loan, that loan has now dropped onto KSE UK, of which Arsenal is the only asset of KSE UK. That debt is now 750 million. Mm-hmm. Right? How much is that is going to be laid on the club? Not so sure. Yeah, that's not really clear. Stepping outside my lane here, but you can see the worst case scenario there. Suddenly we have a much larger debt over much better repayments, but still a larger debt when we were about 140 million away from paying off.
That's exactly what it is, Clive. I mean, that's exactly what it is. It's just stretched out the payment period and lowered the monthly payments and reduced the requirement to have cash on hand on deposit. There'll be a payment holiday for a year or two during COVID, but that's exactly what's been done.
And so the 500 million that Stan used to buy the shares, are we going to have to wear that cost as well? I mean, there are people who are better qualified than me to really say where that's going to go. I'm not going to make those assumptions, but it's there in black and white what the worst case scenario could be. And so you just hope that people are behaving appropriately and behaving with honor. And, the couple of million they're going to save from these jobs, it just makes you wonder what's the motivation for doing it. I will say, and I will say this, I don't think Arsenal will be the only club in the world to do this going forward. I think for, with the football's ending, people are going to be starting to look at themselves, looking how they're operating, look at the revenues that are coming in.
They're not going to have a choice. Smaller clubs won't have a choice, Clive, because they won't have a global conglomerate with access to billions of dollars of capital to fund them.
There's going to have to be some form of restructuring, and we've been so focused on the games every 3 days that we've almost had this little bit of an oasis in our mind that the real world is not really happening. It's the same for most of us, in the UK in particular. Lots of people on furlough. That's coming to an end. The period when employees are going to have to contribute to the cost is coming really quickly, and reality is going to strike. Right, so reality is going to strike with football, but it seems to be that Arsenal at the front of the queue when it comes to making cutbacks, but not at the front of the queue when it comes to investing in expensive 23-year-olds. Do you see what I mean? That belong to another agent. So it is a little bit concerning, the mood music. And it's a shame, really, because I was so positive a couple of days ago, really positive. So I'm looking, I said to you earlier before we started the podcast, there's a 10:30 embargo in the press today, and I expect that full picture to come out tonight and to come out the next couple of days, and the positioning is going to happen, and the context is going to happen. So at this moment in time, I can only tell you how my gut feels. My gut feels really sad, a little bit concerned, but there are many more cards to play, and it's going to be interesting to see what we look like from a structural point of view, what we look like from an additional coaching point of view, because I think there'll be coaches coming in, and what we look like from a squad point of view. I think everything is going to change. We're just going through another phase of change, and COVID is the protective state and the umbrella to allow them to do something maybe a bit more aggressively than they were planning to do the whole time along.
And look, I know the world doesn't work this way, but it's hard not to look at some of the cozy deals we've done with a certain agent or two recently, and the extra million here, $1 million there that spills out of the bucket in their favor, and say that's the entirety of the 55 people we just laid off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I realize the world doesn't work
it's a
that
valid
way,
challenge. It's a valid challenge. You can't help but say that. You don't know if it's true, but it's a valid debate that not just us will arrive at that conclusion.
Yeah, because it's all well and good talking about fiscal responsibility, but if you have cozy relationships where you're throwing a few extra $1 million around, £1 million around, to help a guy who gets you another player, whatever the case may be, you have these cozy relationships. Well, if that had been managed a little more strictly and a little more effectively, maybe you don't have to make these kind of cuts. But let's get to the footballing side of it, because while we feel for the people who will be made redundant, and that is a very serious issue, the issue that we're obviously more sort of interested in the sense of like we can debate it, and it's something that's more within our purview is the footballing side of it. And so I believe there's 2 scouts in particular that were let go. I think McDermott, is that one of them?
Yeah, Brian McDermott.
And
I think he's a
Francis.
Reading manager. Yeah.
Yep, and
Brian
Francis.
Ex-Arsenal player, used to have long hair. Mm-hmm. Now got no hair, much like myself, and was a bright winger in the Geordie Armstrong mould. And he's been a long time Arsenal employee, fan, coach, scout. He's been in the background there for quite a while, but they did spend a lot of time at Reading. So, he's a really good guy. It's a shame if he's been let go.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people. I don't pretend to know the scout situation as well as some. There are some devotees, especially on the Patreon Discord of Francis, who adore him, carrier pigeon being one of them. It's not an actual carrier pigeon, but it's just a person whose handle is carrier pigeon. But, he found Fabregas and Bellerin and I think Martinelli, and there was some rumor that Saliba was someone he was on to. So he's a guy who has a good track record. He's been there 20 years. Clive, does it turn your head a little bit when scouts, especially a longtime scout like this, gets let go? I'm of 2 minds, only in the sense that, look, when new people come in to run an organization, and Raul is still relatively new, and Edu is quite new, they want their people. And sometimes their vision doesn't connect with the vision of the previous people. So that's not unheard of. And you have to accept there's going to be turnover. But at a time when I won't say the facts, but at a time when the narrative is certainly that Raul just wants to use his Rolodex and do relationship-based recruitment and ignore scouting and ignore analytics, it is really hard to defend the contrary position to that when Rosenfels goes and Sven goes and Kajigao goes and McDermott goes. And again, I'm not saying all those guys were valuable. I'm not saying all those guys were good. I'm just saying, there's this Occam's razor, right? Absent any other information, the most obvious thing is probably true. And whether they were good, bad, or otherwise, when your lead scout and your sub scouts and the head of your analytics department all go in a calendar year at a time when it does appear that the recruitment strategy is shifting towards a more cozy relationship with agents, it's hard not to presume that we've shifted to a more cozy relationship with agents. Now, we've done some pretty good business in the last couple of years. I mean, Martinelli, Guendouzi obviously didn't work out, but, Guendouzi was a good signing. Martinelli, the Saliba deal, the Tierney deal is fantastic. Pepe, was a hard deal to get done. We got it done, starting to look like maybe it'll be a good one. There's some head scratchers as well. Cedric, if this Willian thing comes off, we'll talk about that. But so how concerned are you when looking at all of these moves, the latest ones in connection with what's happened, that Arsenal are moving away from what we might consider a more modern, progressive approach to squad building and towards more of this, relationship-based agent coziness model?
Yeah, I'm suspicious now. More suspicious than I was. I suppose when you're making these sort of moves in the club and you're trimming things down, you're restructuring, you say, okay, I'm with you. Then I look at the other side of the ledger and I look at, I'm not saying Willian's a bad player, but I then look at what we're doing there and I think, okay, is that really what you want to be doing? Not sure, right? Depends on the length of the contract. And it also depends on the exit plan. You have to think about this really in a different way. We can get a player in, then we say, okay, we might give you a 2+1 contract, 1 year option on the third year. But on that second year, we expect you to be in Qatar or we expect you to be here and the exit plan's going to be here and we want you to, bring another Kia client like Jolson Fernandez through, for example, help support him on the left-hand side. We bind him at 17. By the time you go, he'll be 20, 19, 20. And that's a strategy. Makes sense. It needs to work, right? It needs to make sure we're not in an Ozil situation. I hear that Arsenal offered Willian a lower wage you can get elsewhere, but it works for him, the structure, the strategy, and the location, etc. So when you see that, I want to believe the good side of it. Then we get the news like today, and then you think to yourself, I'm just really not so sure anymore. But what I will say is that me, as well as many other people, has wanted change, structural change, different layers in the club. I want to change. I'm not going to sit here and say for the last 20 years we have been tip-top when it comes to scouting. We could make a complete podcast on its own on the players that we missed because we didn't move quickly enough. We didn't scout appropriately, made bad decisions on scouting, for example. Weren't listened to certain scout. I'm sure it happens at every club, but boy, it happens to our club more than many others. We are lumpy and clunky, have terrible agent relationships, terrible scouting execution, terrible chief executives. And that's why we got players of mediocrity on high wages, because we just thought we might as well keep them going. And that's why Callum Chambers is on 70 grand a week, right? And it's been there since 2013. That's just rubbish, right? So we need to fix that sort of stuff, right? So I'm not sitting there saying, I've got suspicions about what we're doing now. I'm not going to sit here rose-tinted glass and say what we were doing before was perfect neither, because it wasn't. It had failings. Now, we've got our own data company. You wouldn't guess it, would you? You wouldn't guess it from some of the decisions that we make. And we were the first ones over the hill on that. Our own proprietary data. You wouldn't know it by the way we operate, by the way we play, by the way we scout, by the way we scout other teams. You would never guess it. It took until this manager to come along do we believe in the structure of the football team and the players and the coach and what they're saying to the players. And we don't know. Another thing to just put into your back pocket, maybe Arteta wants a fresh change. Maybe he wants different people around him. I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not saying that's the case. We're going through change. And change isn't nice and it isn't smooth. And if it was, people wouldn't do it, right? It's not nice. It's going to be casualties. There's going to be people impacted. But we want to see the plus side. We want to see us competing with, I'm not saying we're ready for that yet, but we want to see... With
clubs like Bayern Munich, be excited? We can do things that would excite you?
We want to get to a point when a London boy like Jadon Sancho is not thinking about Man United. You see what I mean? That's what we've got to be thinking about. We've got to get to a point when Joe Gomez is not running up the road for £3 million from Charlton to go and play for Liverpool because we're not in shape. We're not in shape as a club. We're not being run as a club.
Well,
we missed out on Raheem. So I could go on and on and on about the things we've done wrong in the past. Let's not pretend what we did in the past was perfect, because it wasn't.
Well, that's true. I don't think anyone expects perfection, by the way. I mean, I think I would just like to know that there's a coherent, competent strategy, and that doesn't mean you can never rely on agents and relationships, because you have to. But especially on a limited budget, I think you'd have to agree, no matter how much you are wedded to a viewpoint, that having some analytics-driven, scouting-driven recruitment that helps you find some targets that are a little more under the radar, that fit a need, that help you build a squad piece by piece in a way that fits your resources, like that's all part of it. It all works together. I mean, being dogmatic about any one approach is probably not right, but we can also look at the teams that succeed, the clubs that thrive, especially the clubs that thrive on a model that more closely resembles ours, and we see the way they do it, and it's instructive. Now, look, there's two ways you can look at any story. One is self-interest. People losing their job tend to have a very specific perspective on why they've lost their job. Or you can say, where there's smoke, there's fire. So when Sven loses his job, and when Rosenfels leaves, and when Kajagawa loses his job, of course, what people write is, rumor has it that they were disgruntled with Raul as agent-focused and relationship-focused recruitment continues to be a growing influence at the club. Okay. That's an easy story to sell when you're getting rid of scouts and analytics guys, and it's an easy story for those people to sell because they're disgruntled and they don't like it. So you have to take it with a grain of salt. But by the other token, I think, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You can't get rid of all of these people at a time when we're looking to sign someone like Willian at 30, about to be 32 years old, a 3-year contract, and not at least tilt your head to one side and say, are we sure we're not just becoming a breeding ground for questionable transactions between interested parties? So let's move into the Willian thing then, Clive, and say, we all love signings. We all love signings. We all love signings, and especially when it's a name we know and we can talk ourselves into all of them. God knows I've been in these arguments. I've been in the wars. I served in the Cedric War. Served in that war. So serve in the Willian War with me. Fight side by side with me. Help me understand why a soon-to-be 32-year-old winger who plays predominantly on the side of our 72 million pound winger and several of our young academy talents, why this 3 to 4 year deal for this guy who just happens, and it's only a coincidence and there's nothing more to it than that happens to be a Kia Jarabchian client, why this is okay and why we should be happy about it.
Well, oh dear. I'm going to give you a view. I don't say it's my view, but I'll just give you a view.
I'd take anything I can cling to at this moment, my friend. Thank
you. If you look at our squad, right, there's a great graphic out there at the moment doing the rounds, and it's about the experience of the squad, right? So, I know James has done something similar on the Athletic historically, but there's one that's out there at the moment, the age profile. And the experienced players in our squad, which beyond peak years, are Aubameyang, Socrates, Ozil, and Louise. And then you've got, in peak years, you've got Leno, Xhaka, Lacazette, Kalashnik, Mustafi, right? And everybody else is young. Everybody else, all right? Next one is Chambers, right? And everybody else is like under 24 or under, just over 24. And so we have got an incredibly young, inexperienced squad. And when I give you the names of those experienced players, apart from maybe Aubameyang and some people, and maybe everyone else is debatable. People debate Xhaka, they debate Lacazette, they debate Kalashnik. Mustafi's in the last year of his contract. Socrates last year of his contract. David Luiz has got 1 year in his contract. Ozil's sitting somewhere on the beach looking at the sky. It's just Aubameyang in peak years that we want to stay. When he's above peak years, he's our best player. And so we have this mishmash of a squad where the experienced pillars are not good enough or on their way out the door. So if you're looking to keep an Aubameyang, you need to bring in ready-made players that are Premiership ready, that really understand what it counts to bridge this team to the next level. And by bridge, I mean really potentially we are heading towards what I call an expensive mentorship scheme, right, where we have a Willian supporting a Saka, for example. We have Coutinho supporting a Smith Rowe. I'm giving a view, Elliot. I'm not saying it's what I would do. I'm giving a view, right? But if you look at the squad, what we lack is experience quality. If we can steal that experience quality for a year or so without too much risk and exposure to bridge us from 8th to 4th, this is a bridging scheme, an experience mentorship scheme. We are in phase 1. Phase 1 is top 4. How can I get to top 4? How can I build around those key players I want to keep, which isn't many, but Aubameyang is number 1. How can I build around those key players I want to keep? I have to build new pillars because it's the experienced players that have fallen off. The Ozils, the Socrates, David Luiz has done okay. He's 1 year exposure. Xhaka's fine, but we know he's got a ceiling. Mustafi, 1 year to go. Kolasinac, free transfer. We want to get rid. Lacazette, he should be potentially used to raise funds. And so even though in our eyes, in our mind, we want to see the 23-year-olds come in because that's what the spreadsheet says, the squad is telling you we got to replace some experienced pillars that we no longer believe in, who no longer believe in us, who are collecting wages because we've overpaid them. We need to take them out. Add the creativity, add the experience, add the now factor to bridge us from 8th to 4th. And then with the extra revenue, we can go again to the next phase, which I hope is a bit more exciting, a bit more 24, 25-year-olds, players that have got a lot of hunger to really prove themselves, but are really exciting when we see them land in our club. I think the first phase is going to be quite turgid. And, the fact that they're all coming from one agent doesn't fill you with a lot of joy. But if that agent can get some of these dead bodies off of our squad sheet, then we look at it and say, well, yeah, you've created an exit plan, you've created room for your client. I'm not seeing no one exiting yet. I know it's only a couple of days, so I'm not seeing no one exiting yet because they're saying I'm seeing people say I'm not going. So we've got Mustafi sitting there with a torn hamstring. No one's going to buy him right now. Kolasinac, I can't see a market for him at the moment. And even though he's a free transfer, no one wants him.
Well, to be fair, he's not good at football, so that's a problem.
Lacazette, we're seeing rumours of Juventus. Atletico Madrid, it's very tenuous. Xhaka, there's a project at Hertha Berlin going on at the moment. But what's the state of that project compared to January, compared to now? All projects look different now, don't they? Xhaka seems happy. We feel that he's another bridge player. He's got a good contract, so he can bridge us for another year. David Luiz, bridge player. Socrates needs to go. Ozil needs to go. And so with those sort of players going, we do need the experienced players to carry these younger players through. And maybe the one signing of a PK player was going to cost us money. It's a centre midfield pillar that seems gone a bit quiet in Thomas Partey to come in. And that's where the investment's going to be. And the rest is going to be loan swaps, free transfers, just to boost the now factor in the squad.
So, look, I think you'd agree with this. The single best defense of the Willian move is Arteta wants it, right? If you believe in Arteta and you need to back him, the single best defense of the move is that this guy who we rate, who we believe in, wanted him. Now, unfortunately, I have to argue with myself right there because I don't think that a coach should be given the players he wants. I think that a coach should be given the latitude to say the kinds of positions and kinds of skill sets he needs, and then the people who are in charge of squad building, the director of football. This is why, look, if you didn't want a director of football, if you didn't want all those structures, then just keep Arsene Wenger or hire a manager. Don't go through the pains of hiring a head coach. If but then you're back in the situation where the coach is, I am responsible for these 600 people that work here. He's managing wages and he's managing wage bills and he can't just focus on tactics. Just giving a coach the players he wants is ruinous because coaches don't have time horizons that are longer than tomorrow. They have to try to win now. And I understand why they may want someone that feels like a ready-made solution. I struggle to think of how having now look, I think the rumor was like 130,000 pounds a week, which isn't awful. If he's back up for Pepe on the right, And a potential solution, he's not starting over Pepe, because if he's doing that, I'm driving to the Emirates. Yes, driving through the Atlantic Ocean to the Emirates with a pitchfork, with a burning torch. I'm burning it down and pitchforking the thing. That is absolutely... You don't spend £72 million and then play Willian at 32 years old. You don't do that. It's not what you do.
Yeah, so Willian, if I'm buying Willian, not that I am or I would, he's going to play off the left. He's going to play off the left.
Well, right. I was getting to that. Go ahead. Go for it, yeah.
Willian's got one signature move. His signature move is that he can shift and shoot. And I'm telling you now, when he goes from left to right, it's unstoppable. Literally unstoppable. He has got great agility, great creativity, great shooting power, just around your favourite zone. Right? He is really, really good. And it's a player that Chelsea really want to keep. So unlike the other Chelsea players that we've taken in the past, they've kicked him out the door. This one they actually want to keep. The issue is they don't want to go beyond 2 years, and we're prepared to go to 3 years. I think Willian would love to stay at Chelsea, honestly.
I can't wait to see him in his 35-year-old season for us. I cannot wait for that. That's going to be blockbuster.
He won't be here. He just wants his contract. Right? He'll be in Qatar. Don't worry about that, or the MLS. But
better be.
but right now, we're relying on youngsters in that situation. We got Martinelli that's out. We've got Saka. And Saka, for me, if we go 4-3-3, he's not going to be playing left wing very often. He's going to be playing left number 8. That's where he's going to play, and I think he's going to be outstanding in that. So he's not blocking Saka. We ain't seen Martinelli till January. So we need something. If we are losing Lacazette and we're going to an extra centre forward to prepare for the future, to future-proof us, then I can sort of see some sense there. When you start to bring Coutinho into this, then you start to think, crikey, what is going on here? Now, Coutinho's another very good player. Statistically, when he was hot a few years ago, he was very, very hot. So I closed my eyes and remember all those shots going to our top corner. I think that would be exciting. But it just feels a bit risky. It feels risky. Older players, older broken egg players coming to Arsenal. How are they arriving? What is the mission? What are they expecting? The fact, if Arteta wants these people, given the fact he's just given us a wonderful experience on his 28th game of the weekend, we're all sort of bought into that. But there's a bit of me that's really concerned about the direction that we're taking, while trying to look at the data, trying to look at the reasonings, understanding that this actually does need to happen. And if I'm thinking what the strategy is, it's a bridge, mate. We're in a bridge situation. We are bridging to the next layer. So those people with long-term thinking, think again. Reduce revenue, 100 million, 140 million pound loss coming next year. How can we bridge the gap to get back to the promised land?
It's going to be hella interesting 2-3 seasons from now when our front line is 27-year-old Pepe, 33-year-old Aubameyang, and 35-year-old Willian. That's going to be a hell of a fun time. Look, there are a couple of ways you could get me a little more excited about this. If Willian becomes first choice on the left, although I don't know that he's ever been a regular left-sided player. Is he a regular left-sided? Okay, so if you can talk me into that, just hear me out.
He can play both sides.
Let's say we sell Lacazette and cash in some money on him. And the plan is to re-sign Aubameyang, which in the squad building pod we'll discuss whether that's even a sensible thing to do. But let's say we do it, and he gets to play central for the first time in his Arsenal career.
Yeah.
You've talked me into something that I'm really intrigued to see. Aubameyang, Willian, Pepe feels like a grown-up, balanced front three. It is very difficult to say we should just play the Smith Rowes and the Willocks and the Nelsons and the Nketiahs and the Sakas and the Maitland-Niles of the world because we need to develop for the future. But we do need to develop for the future. And I think you can look at this move as a bridge builder. I agree. Look, if it's £130,000 a week and no fee, can we make that work over paying £25 million and the same wages to a guy who just blocks the path for these academy kids? Look, I'm not behind this move. I can sort of manipulate some facts around to get to a position where I can understand it. But Clive, looking at another way, sometimes you have to stop doing the same thing and expecting different results. Isn't that, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different result. We keep taking cast off old players from other clubs, and it keeps not working out. Petr Cech, I think you'd have to say, didn't work out. Silvestre didn't work out. David Luiz won the FA Cup, so we're all feeling pretty good about it. He's closer to being able to say worked out, but let's face it, he cost us a lot of points in the league this season. I don't know that you could say that worked out. We've done this a lot, and it never really seems to work out. And I think the problem, Clive, is not just doing this. It's not just taking a guy on pretty significant wages at a position that isn't really a priority from a guy who happens, from Kia. So that has to factor into the discussion here. And why did we target this guy? And if it is an Arteta decision, that makes me feel a little better, only in the sense that, it's not purely Raul and Kia getting together and chumming it up and doing it. But, Clive, there is the very real situation that Father Time is undefeated. Father Time is undefeated. We think, let's get Willian and we will just have Willian. But we are getting 32-year-old Willian. Manchester United just did everything in their power to pay someone to take Alexis Sanchez off their hands, and he's not that old because he just fell apart. Now, look, you could say you saw that coming with Alexis because he never had a break and he had to play football nonstop for years and years and years. But, do you see my point? It's not just the coziness of the deal and the Chelsea cast-off. It's the age. The age is the problem. We're talking about owning him into his 32, 33, 34-year-old seasons. He'll be 35 when he leaves the club, potentially. That, expecting the output from him that has traditionally been associated with his game, I think is not realistic.
Yeah, well, we're in a situation where we have to be creative. I'm giving, look, I wouldn't do this in normal circumstances, right? So you're talking to me in a way which you're thinking I'm trying to defend you. I'm just trying to give another view,
I'm giving, right? So just to be clear, because I gave you a couple reasons why I could justify this too. I'm saying, I think where it all starts to break down is when you really zero in on the age, there is a chance he hits a cliff in this contract. Just cliff.
Absolutely aware of that, right? So, but the situation seems to be, in this current financial environment, that we're looking for creative ways to get two experienced players in Coutinho and Willian. Right, so at zero outlay, zero transfer fee. Right, so this is where we are. It doesn't feel great. If we do buy a 22-year-old left-footed centre-half to play with Saliba for the next 5 to 10 years, then it looks different.
But then we won't have to score goals anyway because we'll never concede ever again. So
that's the most important thing, is we do get an extra centre-half in. If we do buy a centre midfield pillar, and we have to say, well, that's where we spend, but we know what, at the top end we need creativity, we need some now factor. When I see the whole plan, I'll be able to say, I don't like it. But you know what? Someone like Willian doesn't really block the youngsters. Someone like Zaha blocks the youngsters because he's in his peak years, and he would expect to be playing all of the time. Someone like Willian doesn't block the youngsters. He supplements the youngsters. He takes games off. He comes off. He creates the youngsters. He mentors the youngsters. Do you see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there's two ways to look at this. They say, well, you know what? We can invest in our younger players by giving them an older player to play with and to actually make sure they develop with. So I'm just giving that scenario. There's a plan here that's not fully transparent yet. I don't like the opaqueness that the Cronkies have bought, and by buying everything. And the strategy, look, it's becoming more opaque, but in a way where we don't like, given the cozy relationships. And it just makes me feel, I have this feeling, and I used the words before, you'll recognize them when I say them again. I feel Arsenal are vulnerable to opportunists. And I felt that for a while. And the person that makes me think, well, you know what, that's changing is the manager and the coach. So if he's behind these moves, I'm more comfortable than I would be normally. I've got a lot of respect for him, but I cannot get away from the feeling that we are vulnerable to opportunities around the club. And unless they start doing their jobs to make me trust them more and make other people trust them more, and that's not just buying, that is selling as well. That is creating room, that is reducing our cost of our wage bill. Don't be getting rid of masseuses and chefs when you've got players you can't be bothered to find a home for who are just scooping money up and you're not doing anything about it. Do your job on both sides of the ledger. Don't do just one side.
Yeah, and look, I want to be clear. I try, and I know people don't always believe this. I try not to lean into my biases because we all have them, and confirmation bias is a hell of a drug. It's a real thing. I try not to lean into them, Clive. So I try to look at opposing views. And so, like with the Willian thing, maybe it helps us get Aubameyang central and he plays on the left and there's no fee. And if it's 130 a week, it's not that awful because the left is actually a place where we don't have something. And so it lets Saka play there a little bit, but also he can play that 8 that you've been talking about, that left-sided 8. And so, I get this. Believe me, I get this. And he's someone who's positionally very intelligent and works hard off the ball as well, which I think is really important in Arteta. And maybe it's not just a Kia Raul thing because Arteta seems to want it. Like, I try to look at that. But I think, you do have to ignore a lot of evidence too when you make these opposing views. And that's all it is. It's just about trying to put all the evidence together and paint a picture. And when you fire the head scout and you fire the next scout and you fire the next scout and the main guy who runs your data company leaves and heading out the door sort of says he felt that they were being marginalized, that speaks to something, and I mean, I don't want to make it sound like Raul and Vinay and these guys are just totally incompetent, don't know what they're doing. The only thing they do is call Kia Jarabchian on speed dial and get his clients. But also, when you do sign a guy like Cedric and when you do sign a guy like Luiz and when you do sign a guy like Willian, it just smacks of a lack of creativity, I guess is what I'm saying. Clive, it's a huge universe of players out there, players of all ages and prices and varieties. And so when you wind up with Southampton's aging Portuguese right back in Cedric and Chelsea's aging Portuguese, Brazilian right winger, left winger, and you wind up with Chelsea's aging Brazilian center back, and they all sort of have a chummy relationship with the club, it's hard not to lean into my biases because if it's not bias, then it is just an incredible, stunning lack of creativity in finding solutions in the market. If those are the best guys, you know what I'm saying, Clive? I'm trying to make sense here to say that I'm not just trying to be biased, but I look at these moves and I say, you had the whole world of football out there, and these were the solutions. Now, in defense, again, there's always a flip side. Martinelli was an interesting creative solution, and granted, he was just a punt on a young kid, and that was a Kajagao guy, but never mind that. Saliba, there have been other good moves. Tierney's a great move. So I don't want to make it sound like it's just these cozy, lazy moves, but those ones, it's hard not to look at them and just feel there are more efficient, interesting ways to solve the problem in the squad.
Yeah, it feels a bit West Ham, doesn't it? We chuck our rubbish to West Ham.
Here's a Jack Wilshere, an aging Jack Wilshere, and Everton. Everton's another club that loves a washed up player.
It feels a bit West Ham and Everton at the moment, and I hope we're not turning into Chelsea's West Ham. I don't want to be that club. But we're in a situation at the moment, and there needs to be a level of realism. And people say, well, God, they can just give us money, and they could give us money and they could shortcut this. Because I want to see the whole plan. I want to see this story develop. What you're saying, Elliot, my heart says that you're absolutely right, every word. But my natural inclination is always to sort of hope that's not true, because I don't want to be supporting a shower of rubbish. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. I want to be supporting a forward-thinking club. I don't want to be the club that's always the first with the cost-cutting measures, but when you want to spend money, we're the last one to do it. Right? We're the ones talking FFP. And we end up blowing it because we have a huge cash balance at the time. Everyone else was expanding, and we're sitting here now wanting to expand and got money to do it. There's been some terrible decisions taken historically, and with that sort of history behind you, you can't help but be suspicious about where we are right now. We are vulnerable. Every club's vulnerable, but we seem to be vulnerable to a close-knit set of people, and they have to do their work. They have to do their work, because I guarantee you, my Twitter feed is lighting up, and it will light up into the evening, and they have to do their work because the Arsenal world is watching very closely.
And look, you just have to look at Chelsea, the team that Willian's coming from. Pulisic will be 22 this season. Kai Havertz will be 22 this season. Timo Werner will be 24 most of this season. They're getting rid of the 31, 32-year-old. They're not solving their problems with the Willians and the Luizes of the world. They're going out and they're getting guys and I get it. They're spending money we don't have to spend. So that's not my point. My point is just you look at a Liverpool or you look at a Chelsea or you look at those clubs and
let's talk about Chelsea and Liverpool then. A classic example. So Chelsea, over the last sort of 5 years or so, have actually had over the last sort of 10 years or so, have actually had a 1.5 billion interest-free loan from their owner. So that's the money he's put into the club before he's even talking about the grade, etc.
Not a Chelsea fan, the dog?
Someone's come to the door, sorry.
No, it's fine.
A £1.5 billion injection. So we have to compete with that, and we do. We beat them at the weekend.
Yeah.
Right?
By the way, never let that be forgotten. We did win the FA Cup just 3-4 days ago. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. So I know you're trying to mute there to get the dog quiet, but just keep going. Yeah. The dog is a charming part of the podcast. It's fine.
So a £1.5 billion loan, and then you look at that and you think, well, we have to compete with that. We have to, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating seeing them walk off with the trophies. It's frustrating them watching them in Munich with a goalkeeper that we should have had in Peter Cech playing for us, and with players that we really wanted that chose them, like Mata, for example, and they win the European Cup, something that we've all wanted to see, we've not managed to see, and they've gone to leagues 4 or 5 times. It's incredibly frustrating because the level of investment that they've had above and beyond what we've had, and we have to suck that up. And then there's Liverpool way, and I'm reading today at Liverpool looking at a left back called Jamal Lewis, who I know very well, and the way they're scouting him is really smart. He's a young British player. He's got Northern Irish heritage. But his number one skill set, he's playing the Norwich defence, which conceded a lot of goals going backwards. But going forwards, carrying the ball, his carry forwards metrics are tremendous. He used to be a winger as a youngster, so he can carry the ball and he can run. And he's going to be brought in as Robertson's understudy. What does Robertson do? They switch play and he carries the ball, whips the ball in. They're buying a player for a specific role. They're ahead of us. They are ahead of us. Now, we don't even know the shape we're going to play next year. We don't. We've had 2 patch-up shapes so far, 4-2-3-1 to hide certain players. We had injuries, then we had a 3 at the back system to hide other players. So right now, we don't know what we're going to look like. Let's not get too heavy on the critique of the players that we're signing, because we don't even know our shape. When we see our shape, we will be able to then decide, are these the right buys or not? When we see the entries going out the door, the exits going out the door, we'll have even more clarity about that. I'm trying to hold my fervour. I'm trying to hold it back. I'm trying to, while suspecting and worried about our vulnerability as a club, hoping there's some oversight within the club. They hired a new director that come from Clifford Chance into our club the other day. I can't remember his name now, something Lewis maybe. I'm hoping that he was going to come into the club. Tim Lewis, that's his name. Hope he's going to come into the club and offer some sort of oversight and financial advice. Well, he's been there a little while, and the first thing he's done is chop 55 people. Right? So we're changing. We're restructuring. Things are happening. The story's not complete yet. But my gut is nervous. My gut is worried. But the plan is not revealed, and I'm going to hang in there for a little bit longer before I absolutely hit the hammer. Sure.
You know what's hard, Clive, is that like whenever you evaluate this stuff, the real way to evaluate is a longer time horizon. But it's hard because you can't say, well, let's podcast in 3 years and see if this worked out. Because the problem is you're constantly evaluating in the moment. And unfortunately, these kinds of moves are moves that you can't evaluate right when they happen. You can say what you think about them, but you can only see... Look, 3 seasons from now, Clive, Mikel Arteta should be coaching an Arsenal that is in the hunt for a title and in the Champions League, if the project is going the right direction. If he's not, the project will have failed. And it may have failed because scouts got it wrong. It may have failed because we paid a lot to agents to get us the wrong solutions and invested a lot of money in overage players. Unfortunately, we won't know that until that time. So right now, all we are doing is speculating that we're on the wrong path, but we could easily be proven wrong about that. So,
I mean,
we need time to evaluate. It'll take time before we know for sure that this was wrong or right.
Absolutely. So, for example, Ozil's on 80 million a year. We managed to give him 8 million and someone takes the 10 million and he's away. He's gone. And then we bring in Willian. He's better than Ozil. Right? He's more effective. His numbers are way above.
If he steps foot on the pitch, he's more effective than Ozil because,
exactly.
But
then we look at it completely different.
But by the way, Ozil's still here. He's still here.
Ozil's still here, exactly. This is what I keep talking about. There's 2 sides to this ledger. Do you see what I mean? We have to focus on the exits to create room for the people coming in. So if I say that to you, then you think, oh well, Coutinho, if we get rid of Socrates, Mustafi, and Ozil, and we bring in Coutinho and Willian, well, we're actually up, right? Depending on what we have to pay them to go. So then you start to look at it in a different way. It looks more efficient. It looks like, okay, we can't afford to be too inexperienced. So we have to replace experience with better experience and don't find ourselves in a contractual situation which is damaging. And so the offer that was on the table for Willian before COVID is way lower post-COVID. They may have had an extra year on the contract, so £110,000 a week to make it 3 years rather than a big number for 2 years and a big signing on fee. So they've reduced that. It's up to him if he wants to take it or not. Do you want to go to US or do you want to go to other clubs that are looking at him? So that's his choice. There it is. Again, how does it look alongside the 55 people that have gone? Doesn't look great. How does it look alongside Ozil taking his money? Doesn't look great. The story's not fully unfolded.
Yeah. Well, let's leave it there. I think it is understandably a day of concern and confusion about what the direction is. And it is a day for leaning into biases. I confess that. And I do think that in modern football, you need scouts and you need analytics people to help you find deficiencies in the market, find assets that maybe other clubs aren't as focused on, that you need to be able to scour the massive pool of talent now with football being so big all over the world and talent being everywhere. You need to find those diamonds in the rough that once upon a time were easier to find, that Arsene Wenger made a living finding. Just ask about someone like Kolo Touré, right? But we don't know for sure that we're not doing that. I think we have to be careful about not leaning into those biases, but it is a hard day and a sad day for people who are being made redundant, and a hard day not to lean into some of the concerns we have about the club. I will do my best to temper that reaction, but I have to admit, Clive, that my instinct, my antenna are up and suggest that something is wrong. But to be fair, those antenna always get a very strong signal.
But your antenna's not often wrong, really. So I always take the calm of you, right? That's why we podcast together. I always breathe for a little while and see what's going to happen. And there's a young Brazilian centre-half that we're looking at that I'm really excited about from Lille. Again, if that was to happen, you can see a back four developing for years to come of the right ages, right? So that's exciting if that was to happen. And that's linked to Edu, example, another top Brazilian player. So I just want to see this develop. I want to believe in these guys. I don't want to believe that they're doing things unscrupulously because of cozy relationships and our club is financially vulnerable. I don't want to believe that, even though, Elliot, it's hard not to ignore the smoke signals.
Okay. Well, let's leave it there. Tomorrow, for patrons, we'll have a squad building pod. Ted Knutson from StatsBomb, the founder of StatsBomb, will be on, which is exciting. Mohammed will have some scouting. Some players he scouted last summer. He did a scouting pod and came up with some interesting names. Saliba, before we were linked with him. Sangare, Nkunku,
that was another miss.
Angelino, there was another one. So he's really good at tracking these guys down. So let's look forward to that. That'll be available for patrons tomorrow. And Scott will be on that. Clive will be on that. It'll be a good pod. So if you want to sign up and listen to that, you certainly can. But we'll have obviously more of this fantastic moaning into a microphone for free stuff available as well. So Clive's on Twitter, ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a break. Scott's still coming up. So we went longer than we expected here, but Scott's coming up. So stay with us. Scott will be on after the break. Stay with us. Yeah, I said that part. You know what? Just listen to this music break. I'll be right back. We're back. Went a full hour with Clive. Wasn't expecting that, so probably should just end the podcast. But since I said that Scott was going to be on, I guess we should just have Scott on. So you can find Scott on Twitter. _crab. Hello, Scott.
Yeehaw.
Yeehaw, indeed. What an intro. All kinds of good intro there. So, Scott, let's dive right into it. Tell me all of the reasons why you are very, very excited for Arsenal to sign Willian.
I mean, I guess I'm resigned of it happening, and I'm trying to be positive because, being negative is never good for anybody's health. So, I mean, I guess the big thing is that Willian is still a good player, and it's good to sign good players, and he's probably, a guy that will improve Arsenal next year. So, yay, everybody be happy.
Yeah, well, great. Okay, so why don't you tell me this? Look, I'm on the Chelsea front, I've been more focused on their young players because I'm kind of curious whether they're going to come good and what that means for the future of Chelsea as a rival. So I admit I haven't really focused on Willian. I sort of have been told he had a good season. Can you contextualize the kind of season he had? And, if he doesn't fall off the age cliff next season, what we are getting from him and whether you're excited, at least putting the squad side of it aside, whether it's the right move, would you be encouraged about the actual player playing for Arsenal next season?
I mean, in the sense that, Arsenal don't really have he fills a lot of the role that Arsenal need. Arsenal aren't the most creative teams in creating shots for their teammates. So that's something that he's good at. He's a good ball progressor. He's good at getting the ball from the midfield and actually moving it into the penalty box, either through passing or carrying. So that's something that will be very helpful.
And badly needed.
Yeah,
frankly.
And that's one of the things that's actually, it's not necessarily kind of damning with faint praise, but, I saw somebody compare him to Alex Iwobi and their radars, and it's eerily similar how good or how well those match together. So that's something that was definitely missing from Arsenal this year, and hopefully something that Willian is able to do. He takes a few shots, not always in the greatest locations. But yeah, he's tricky winger, is good with the ball at his feet, good at passing. Consistently rates as one of the the higher people in my passing rating, usually around the 95th percentile or so. So he's got lots of good skills, and hopefully those continue to not deteriorate next year. And however long this contract is, it might get ugly at the end though.
So I guess then the question is, let's for a minute, instead of just beating up this move as being dumb for one reason or another, let's say that this is a move that we're going to do.
But let's just put it's a dumb move.
Okay, right, fair. Okay, yes. But rather than analyzing the dumbness of it, let's analyze the ways in which Arteta could use this player such that it adds value. Do you see him, as we discussed in the previous section, playing on the left, allowing Oba to move central, possibly seeing Lacazette leave the club? Is that the evolution of this move for you? Because I can't. There are very few reasons I can understand why we'd be signing him, but signing him to be Pepe's backup makes zero sense to me.
Yeah, I definitely think that. I mean, he can theoretically play anywhere in the attacking, band, left, right, central. He's played all positions, although he has primarily been from the right. So if Arsenal are signing him to play from the right, that is more of a head scratching, because that's one of the few players, for attacking wise that Arsenal actually have that's a peak player, and it's a guy that they just signed, and I'm hoping that was showing green shoots at the end of last year and can hopefully kick on to be kind of what we paid for him to be. So I think that would be very silly to see him do that. But then you also have to remember Arsenal do have Europe next year. It's going to be a very compressed Premier League schedule. So I think that rotation and actually having players you can actually trust in those positions is good. We've all seen what the bench has been like in these last couple of weeks, where it's been pretty ugly and barren. And it would be nice to, if Willian isn't starting, be able to bring him as, fresh legs off the bench would be a positive thing. But yeah, I definitely imagine that he will be primarily starting from the left with hopefully, Aubameyang through the center and Pepe on the right. I guess that's the plan. But then you do have to worry also that that's also where two of Arsenal's best prospects really kind of start with. So you don't really want to block them. So yeah, it's a bit of a head scratcher.
Yeah, I mean, look, Clive posited that Saka may play more as an 8. I still think Saka's a left winger. I just put him on the freaking left wing. The guy crosses beautifully. He's got a dribble. He plays great in the final third. I'd love to see him there. Blocking his path seems silly to me. Maybe you play Willian as more of an 8. Maybe you let Willian be more of a final third entry ball progression guy.
And I think that's something that makes sense. As players get older, it's usually go closer to goal or go further away from goal. So maybe as he's, he loses a little bit of a step and can't do the winger things, maybe he follows it's a huge shoes to fill to kind of say, Santi Cazorla type path where, he drops deeper, becomes more of that connector player, a little bit,
I can't see
like
him dropping
that.
that deep. That seems a bit much
I
to
don't
me.
anticipate it, but yeah, that's something that you could imagine, something like that. Not being a guy that plays around the penalty box, maybe plays as that attacking 8 kind of a move. I don't think that would be totally outlandish.
Yeah,
But
I mean,
hard to see. Yeah.
if you want to play a 4-3-3, I mean, and you have Ceballos, if he stays kind of shuttling and more box to box, and Willian staying a little more advanced, and then whoever that deepest player is, I mean, I'd like it to be someone other than Granit Xhaka, but if it's Xhaka, so be it. Like, that could work for me. I think the other interesting thing then is between Martinelli, who eventually comes back, and between Saka, I would like them to have playing time. The fact that we have Europa now means they will get playing time. And whether or not they play more in the Premier League, well, Europa won't be relevant for Martinelli. He won't be playing, obviously. He'll be coming back. But so I can see Willian playing as an 8, as a left wing, and as a right wing. He would have some playing time at all those positions, and maybe there's a value to that. Maybe he even plays like a false 9 a little bit. I mean, the thing that's weird to me about the idea of him playing on the left and Aubameyang moving central is Arteta went out of his way to never use Aubameyang as center forward. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not like Lacazette started some games there, but when it wasn't Lacazette, it was Aubameyang, and Arteta's chomping at the bit to get Aubameyang central. Scott, there is no suggestion that Arteta wants to use Aubameyang as a center forward up top in a 4-3-3. Like, there's been no indication of that at all. Now, that doesn't mean, I mean, he's on record saying this isn't the football he wants to play because he doesn't have the players he needs yet. But, like, I just think there's a lot of wish casting from Arsenal fans who think this move helps get Aubameyang into the center because Arteta never played him there. I mean, he had times he could have. He really never did it.
Yeah, and it's one of those things is that Aubameyang really did kind of settle into that, the guy that starts on that left wing, but it was really more of a left forward versus, like a left wing or a, left attacking midfielder role. So I liked the way that he did play off of it. And then I think there was starting to be a little bit more of the, our striker plays more as a false 9 when we were doing this, 3-4-3 kind of a thing. So we could actually have something like that. So, I mean, yeah, I'd like to see him get more touches central. I'd like to see Pepe be able to get more touches central, but I think that would really, necessitate Arsenal switching to that 3 in the midfield so we can have more of those guys that connect. And then, you have your, fullbacks that are there to provide you with.
So let me ask you this then, which is literally what I do as the host of a podcast. I got to stop saying, let me ask you this. It's literally what I do. And then the irony is, I don't ask you anything. I just say something for like 2.5 minutes and stop talking and expect you to answer back. So the whole thing doesn't make any sense. But setting aside that meta portion of the podcast, one of the deals we've been linked with is Coutinho. Now,
yes.
If we were getting Coutinho, and set aside for a minute whether we should do that deal, I think that makes the Willian deal even less sensible for us, because in my mind, if you think Willian can sort of play more like near the top of the box, play kind of that 8 role, kind of become that playmaker and linking player that we haven't really had, great. But then, that's where Coutinho wants to operate. You're certainly not going to put him on the wing. And if you think you're going to play Coutinho and Willian, then you're really talking about less playing time for Saka, who you've just re-signed. I don't think that's the best outcome. So do you think that doing the Willian move puts the end of the speculation on a Coutinho move, or could you see both happening? Would you rather have Coutinho? I mean, I think I'd still rather have Coutinho. I mean, he's younger. I think his ceiling is higher anyway. I think he does more of the things we miss. But where do you fall on those two rumors and the way they're intertwined?
I mean, yeah, and I think you're right. They do kind of operate in areas that they both want to be in, especially if Willian is going to, drop back a little bit further, not necessarily be a full-on attacking, midfielder kind of a thing. So, yeah, it is a little bit confusing about why, but I guess it's also not confusing in who their agents are, and that basically is who runs Arsenal these days. So, yeah. You're making me depressed, and I didn't want to be depressed.
Well, you're an Arsenal fan, so welcome to the party, pal, as Bruce Willis once said. Kind of funny because Tim Stillberto on Twitter, who is with his new baby, but still tweeting through it, back on May 7th, 2019, he said, I would imagine Arsenal will start becoming linked with a lot of Kia Jarabshian players once Edu takes the role. That's the link to follow here. Interesting. Subsequently, in that thread, Limpar33 said he's also Coutinho's agent. And Tim said, yeah, David Luiz is too. So, I mean, the layers of prescience there are pretty crazy. This lets us start to tilt the conversation, and we won't go long since we're already over the hour mark on the podcast. But, I mean, look, I don't want to kick the club. I don't want to assume the worst. With scouts being let go, it's hard not to lean into the perception that we are really becoming driven by cozy agent relationships. So do you have a feeling about the future of Arsenal existentially and what we're seeing happen right now in terms of the structure of player recruitment and squad building?
I mean, to me, the worry is that we've been kind of lurching from one short-term stopgap move to the next. I imagine that's something that could just continue. We're going to talk more about this later when we're doing some squad building, but you look at the way that Arsenal are built and you can kind of see the makings of a plan and why these moves kind of make sense. But it's very much, we have old players, we have young players, we don't have much in between. So it's like, I guess the plan is let's try to build a bridge to these young promising players that we want to see. And you can see a certain logic to that. But it would also be nice if the players that we're getting now had some sell-on value when they are done being the bridge, and we could actually, use that to continue to build instead of, kind of being players that, as soon as they sign on the dotted line, become a negative transfer value kind of a thing like we have so many of at the club right now. So I guess in a sense, I see the semblance of a plan. I don't love the plan. It's not what if I was a consultant, would have tried to sell to the club to try to do. But I guess, I'll try to trust the process as best I can because these are kind of the cards that have been given.
Yeah, I think look, there is always a tendency to view things as either totally good or totally bad. And that is never the case. But when you are trying to build a squad to win Champions Leagues and titles, which is what Arsenal Football Club should be about, there's not a huge margin for error, especially given that we're not just going to be funded by Daddy Warbucks. At some level, the resources are limited, right? And so the margins are small and the resources are limited. You have to make the resources go as far as they will. Are there times when these cozy agent relationships and agent-led recruitment can lead you to some really good opportunities? There are. But you've got to make sure that that's in balance with other approaches that can help extend your resources beyond what they might otherwise secure. Now, you could say Tierney's a great example of doing that. Martinelli is, and Guendouzi, his shitheadedness aside. I don't think it's time to go full doom because there are moves that certainly are encouraging. But isn't that really the point, Scott? It's that essentially to achieve what a club of our stature wants to achieve, with the resources being finite in the way that they are, unlike, say a Manchester City, you just don't have a huge margin for error. And leaning into any one approach, especially an approach like agent-led recruitment, is probably not going to get you to the mountaintop.
Yeah, and I think, the news coming out of Arsenal right now is that, we don't have money. It's one of those things this really highlights. We can't really afford to make big mistakes. And, these are the kind of moves that, yes, it's a free transfer, but it still comes with a really large commitment. And there's not really a way to get rid of the asset that doesn't really kind of hurt the club financially. You're going to have to include money. You're going to have to pay wages to be able to kind of move on a guy. And that's something that's, happened repeatedly with this team. So it's really hard to, you can't just, write off the mistake. If, you're Manchester City, you can afford to just, hold on to something. Manchester United can do the same thing. Chelsea have been able to do the same thing. You really have to, hit on a lot of your things. You have to be able to do that. And, then I guess if you don't hit on them, make it so the mistake is not so big that it absolutely hamstrings you to whatever you have going on.
Yeah. And I mean, as we're recording this, there's news breaking that Gabriel, the Lille center back, has chosen Arsenal. And news breaks all the time in the transfer window that is blatantly wrong. This comes from a pretty good Ligue 1 Lille source. You never know. You just never know. Maybe, just maybe, they know what the fuck they're doing. I don't know. I guess we will find out. I mean, at the same time, Nathan Ake just went to Manchester City for 41 million pounds, confirmed. So, like, this idea that the post-COVID market is just going to be dead, maybe there's going to be a little bit of haircut, but I'm sorry, Scott, I don't see 90 million pounds, which is close to 120 million euro for Jadon Sancho and 41 million for Nathan Ake, 41 million pounds. I'm not, and granted, the big clubs still have money spent. Manchester United, Manchester City can spend. Ain't no pandemic stopping that. But I don't see tons of evidence that the market is this cataclysmic void, vacuum of activity that we might have expected.
I mean, I think you will see that when you start going lower. So I don't think there's going to be necessarily, big money. I don't think that if Arsenal wanted to sell within the Premier League, there's going to be able to get those giant fees from some of the other mid-table clubs that, you would normally expect to see. And I think that it's really then we're still going to have to depend on money filtering out. I don't think that it's sell a player to free up money to be able to make other moves happen. So we're going to have to see some of the big teams make some moves first to maybe free up so everybody can, be able to have money to filter through the system.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that's interesting is given that it's a day when, 55 people at Arsenal have been let go and the players a few months ago gave back 12.5%, I'll be really curious to see how the football world reacts, because on the one hand, you have teams cutting back on salaries of, staff, and you have players being asked to give money back, and there's certainly revenue losses. Let's not pretend there aren't. But on the other hand, at least the early part of the transfer market, it doesn't look hugely impacted. But again, some of these clubs, they're never going to feel the sting of this sort of thing, at least not initially. So we'll see. Let's leave it there because it's getting to be a long pod. Scott, we got plenty more to do on the Patreon side with squad building and stuff like that. So I will talk to you soon. Scott's on Twitter, _that_crab. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
All right. We'll have a lot more. We'll have more free pods on transfer news and breaking transfer news, and hopefully no more hard topics and serious topics, things like that, because we don't want to deal with a lot of that. Just announcements of exciting players who are under the age of 35 coming to Arsenal. So we love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10 transfer window news.